Hey, this is Kirk Walden, and welcome to Coffee with Kirk on the Pregnancy Help Podcast. And today we're going to talk about one quiet connection. And if you've been with me and listened to other of these podcasts, you'll know that one of the things I reference a lot here is the story of Samaria. I've touched on it several times, and it's probably because I was working on a book about that very thing for about 4 years, and me and Jen finished that book, Saving Samaria. But today I want to go back into one episode that all of us in the pregnancy help community have talked about a lot in different ways, the Samaritan woman. But I want to talk about some outlying characteristics of this engagement between Jesus and the Samaritan woman, because I believe these characteristics of this encounter really touch on what we do. And I want to use this as an encouragement to all of us, because I think in the world out there today, we've got so many huge things happening. There's a lot of news. There's things seem to be shifting under our feet all the time. And I think we can forget this power of one quiet connection. So that's where I kind of want to go today. And I'll start with a story, because I think the Lord led me into this in a recent appointment I had. I actually had a dermatological appointment, if that's what you call it. And it's just a checkup, and I'm fine, just in case you're asking. But I went to the place where I got the checkup, and it was a new place for me, but I thought it was where my boys had always gone. And unfortunately, it's not the same place that my boys had always gone. This was down the street, and I'd made an appointment at a place I'd never been before. Well, not a big deal. And I go in, and as I'm thinking about it, I think, man, I really want to go to the place where my boys went down the street. Well, and then the Lord, I feel like, kind of reminded me, you know what? This is where you are. This is where you're going to make connection today. And whether it's the right decision, wrong decision, I don't even know. Appointment went great. But I think sometimes that in our rush to get through the next thing, we forget that every appointment we have is a divine appointment. And we never know what those divine appointments may lead to. We never know when we're planting seeds that will come to fruition later on. We just don't know. And so I decided to go all in on my appointment. I got to know the people in the office and those sorts of things. And I can't say anything major came of it, but I'll go back in a few weeks and we'll see what happens. Again, the point being, we just don't know. And when a client or patient comes into the doors of our ministry, whether it's a pregnancy help medical clinic, pregnancy resource center, maternity home, whatever it happens to be, we never know the power of that one little connection, that one quiet connection. We just don't know. I don't know what Jesus knew when he stepped into Samaria and sat down at Jacob's well. I think he knew the historical significance, without a doubt, of being at Jacob's well, and he waited for the Samaritan woman to show up. One quiet connection. And as I've probably said before on this podcast or in other talks that I've done, we know what happened out of this one engagement. But when Jesus walked into Samaria, he had a lot of options. He could have gone and preached a sermon in front of thousands. But I just want to point out, as I thought about this episode that we're doing, Jesus spoke to a lot of people. There was a Sermon on the Mount, which was incredible. And we read it today and we dive into it and we talk about all the ramifications of what he said and all the things we can learn from that. But you know what we don't get? To my knowledge, and check me if I'm wrong, to my knowledge, we don't see one person coming out of that who made an extreme difference in the world. I'm sure it happened, but this was not recorded. That someone was at the Sermon on the Mount and went on to do this or that changed, that advanced the kingdom in a major way. And again, I don't doubt that this was an important moment. I don't doubt that people were moved, and I don't doubt that lives were changed, and perhaps thousands and hundreds of thousands. But it's interesting to me that we don't see any of the gospel authors talking about this, Luke, Matthew, and saying, you know what, there was a person there and this is what happened. It's an interesting thing to say that when Peter gave his first message on the day of Pentecost, we don't have a specific person coming out of that who changed the world. And again, don't doubt that it happened, but it's just not recorded. But with the Samaritan woman, we have a recording by John of what happened after that engagement, that encounter with Jesus, where she went to her village of Sychar. And after going to her village, she says, "Come see a man who told me all the things that I've done. This is not the Messiah, is it?" And many in the town believed. Jesus stayed 2 more days, and some scholars say the entire town came to follow Jesus Christ. Well, isn't that interesting that it was a one-on-one conversation that changed everything? Jesus could have gone into Samaria and preached a sermon to hundreds. He could have gone into a town square, such as the village of Sychar. And in those moments in that town square, he could have preached the gospel. He could have talked about following him, or he could have had a meeting with all the chief priests of the Samaritans. He could have done a lot of different things. He could have gone in and even performed a lot of healings to get attention for what he was trying to do in Samaria. None of these are wrong. They're great. But that's not what he chose to do. Instead, and I think Jesus is giving you and me a message right here. Instead, he goes and sits at a quiet well outside the village, waiting for someone who had come alone to sit down at that well. And if you recall the story, Jesus sends his disciples off into the village to go get food. He doesn't even want them around. He wants this to be a one-on-one interaction because he had some important things to talk about with the Samaritan woman. And you know how the story begins. He asks for a drink of water, which I love because Jesus proves himself to be vulnerable right there. He didn't need to ask anybody for water. Jesus could have brought that water out of that well. He could have done whatever he needed to do to make sure he got the nourishment, but instead he asks. He makes himself vulnerable and asks her a question. "Hey, I need a drink of water. Can you help me here?" All of a sudden, he goes from, as we know, the Messiah to just a guy needing a drink of water so that they're on a level playing field. But an even more salient point for our discussion today is that this is a quiet conversation outside of the crowds, outside of the people. No one else is going to hear. And John records it. I'm not sure how he gets that, whether he's waiting in the wings over there and cheated and didn't go off to a village, or whether Jesus actually told him, "Hey, I need you to hang out and record this." I have no idea. But again, a quiet conversation, one quiet connection, as is our title for this episode. And from that quiet connection, we see the doors open to Samaria. We see the doors open to awakening in Samaria. We see Jesus plant the seeds of awakening in one person. Because as you know, we get to the end of this entire encounter, which we won't go through, but we get to the end of this encounter, and this woman is so captivated by Jesus. She wants living water. She's willing to risk everything by being honest with him and saying, "I don't have a husband." And Jesus, of course, explains or reveals that she's had 5 husbands and is living with a man. And she says, "Oh my goodness, I believe you're a prophet." But through all of this woman who had been kicked to the curb and marginalized even by her people in a marginalized society, because the Jews wouldn't have any dealings with Samaritans. So she was the, quote, worst marginalized of the marginalized. And she still has a little bit of hope. And she says to him, when the Messiah comes, he will declare all things to us. And I love this because here she is. She doesn't feel like she deserves anything, but she still has hope that there will be a Messiah, and maybe that Messiah will come for her. And I just think, what a moment when Jesus looks her in the eye and says, "I who speak to you am he." I mean, I can't imagine what she must have been thinking to hear that she was talking to the Messiah. And he had given her every reason to believe he was different. He had explained her entire past to her. He understood. And I think even that question, when she asks, "Hey, you Jews worship over here in Jerusalem. We worship Mount Gerizim, which is the right place." And his wise answer, which is that salvation is from the Jews. But then he launches into, "But you know what? The Father is seeking those who will worship him in spirit and in truth. That's what he's looking for. He's not really worried about whether it's this mountain or that place. What he's looking for is people who are truly seeking him. And that's when her thoughts seem to pop up and she goes, oh my gosh, this guy is so different from anybody I've ever met. And that's when she says that the Messiah is coming. She knows it. She knows the Messiah is coming. And I believe with everything in me that she thought this could be the guy. And then, of course, Jesus says, I who speak to you am he. And what a moment that is. But it's a quiet moment. Jesus never declares himself to be the Messiah in front of a ton of people. We can say that he would say he's the Son of Man, but this Messiah talk was started with her. Well, with that said, again, she goes back into her village. She tells the people that she may have met the Messiah, invites them to come out and see him, which they do, and he stays, and we see the awakening begin in Samaria. And this is the smoldering fire that is still going forth when Philip goes into Samaria in the book of Acts and begins to preach, and we see an awakening begin that is so powerful that Peter and John have to go and see it for themselves. And when they do, they're praying for the Holy Spirit to come down on these people. And so we see another amazing moment there in the book of Acts. But it all starts with one person and one quiet connection. Everything in Samaria starts. And later on, we see Samaria become a safe haven for the church and even a key outpost of the church. This place where no Jew would ever go becomes a key outpost for the church, all because of Jesus. And it all started with one quiet connection. And so here's what we want to talk about today. We go through our daily lives. We go into the office at our pregnancy help ministry. And I don't know if we really grasp every single day. I'm just going to tell you, I don't. And I'm speaking to myself today. I don't often grasp the enormity of those one quiet connections that I go through during the days. I don't think I really grasp what can happen, because without getting into theology, we are the representatives of Jesus on this earth. If we claim to follow Jesus Christ, whatever our faith background is, if we claim to follow Jesus Christ, it's true that we are his representatives here on earth, just like the apostles were. And as Jarrell Godsey said many years ago, and I have not forgotten this. He was within a group, and Jarrell said, we are the 2000th chapter of the book of Acts, or whatever it happens to be. That's what we are. The book of Acts takes us through, I believe, 28 chapters. But after that, the work of the church goes on and on and on, and it's still going on today. And we are his representatives today. Do we grasp? And I want to focus in on this. Do we grasp that person who's coming in the door of our center, of our mobile unit, of our maternity home, of our clinic, do we grasp that one quiet connection, that one quiet encounter that we're going to have that day could be an encounter that plants seeds of awakening in our culture? And you and I both know our culture desperately needs awakening today. There's nobody that will tell us that we're a united culture. We know we're divided. We're divided over so many things today. But the answer, my answer is often, I wish people would agree with me more. And maybe that's good. I don't know. But the ultimate answer for our culture today is awakening. And in quiet connections, quiet encounters that we go through each day, in the walls of our work, in the grocery store, in different places where we go, in our churches, those are places where quiet connections take place. Now, if I hear my pastor's sermon or a homily or a message, whatever we want to call it, that's important, and I take notes every week. and it has great impact. But it's the quiet connections outside of the big room where we happen to be. It may be in a group we have that's of people in our church. It may be at a study we go to during the week. Like I said, it may be in the grocery store. It may be in our neighborhoods or apartments or wherever we happen to be. One quiet connection can plant the seeds of awakening. And I'm asking myself this question as I ask all of us. Do I really get that? Do I really understand that every single appointment, even in places where I don't mean to be, like when I went to the dermatologist today, I was like, oh, this is not the place I thought it was. Do I recognize that even an accident could be an encounter where God is giving me an opportunity to plant seeds of awakening? And am I using that? Am I cognizant of that? Am I thinking about my words and what I happen to say? And this isn't to put pressure on any of us, not at all. Because if you look at the story of the Samaritan woman, it was just a conversation. It starts with asking for water. It goes to living water. Hey, I've got water you don't know about. Living water. Hey, give me some of that. Let's talk about bringing your husband so he can hear too. All of those things are just conversations. And I want us to take the pressure off of ourselves. When a client or patient comes in to our offices, it's just a conversation. It's just asking questions. It's just getting to know her. It's just listening to her story. And as we do, those opportunities are going to arise where this quiet connection could become something that plants the seeds of awakening. And I want you to know that. God, and this is with Jesus. I get that. Jesus is different than any of us, that's for sure. You don't have to have a theological degree to know that. But at the same time, I think he's laying out a blueprint for each of us to say, hey, there is no encounter too small, no quiet connection too small, because this is where the seeds of change are truly planted. It's not to say that the big moments in our churches or in stadiums with an evangelist or anything, these are very important moments, no doubt. But I think Jesus is trying to remind us, yes, the Sermon on the Mount was huge. We still quote it today. We still study it today. And it still changes lives and plants seeds of awakening today. But don't forget the quiet connection. Let's not overlook that as we look at our phones or whatever we do. And I'm thinking about my phone and is my focus there, or is it on quiet connections that can take place anywhere? Whether the doctor's office, whether in a coffee shop, am I looking at where the quiet connections are right in front of me? Not looking out and trying to go find them, because often they're right in front of us. When Jesus went into Samaria, that well was right in front of him. The fact that he was going into Samaria means he wasn't taking a detour. He was taking a straight line as to where he needed to go. And I think as we go on a line to wherever we need to go, those quiet connections are going to land in front of us. And all we need to do is pay attention. That's all we need to do. When you come into the office, you've got appointments lined up. You may have a fellow staff member who comes into your space or your office or whatever it is, and a conversation there could be such an encouragement that it brings that person who you connect with in the office to a point to where they're more engaged so that they plant seeds of awakening. We don't know. One thing I do know, and we'll close with this: quiet connections plant seeds of awakening that change the world. Jesus showed us this in Samaria. I'm going to think about this going forward, and all I'm doing today is sharing this with you. What if each of us in the pregnancy help community, every single one of us, 2,900 in the United States, more than 4,000 sites around the world where we work together in unity to bring life when those come in our door? All of these locations, what if each of us stopped for a moment each morning and said, Father, this is a day of quiet connections. Help me see them right in front of me. Help me be someone who plants seeds of awakening. What would happen if the thousands upon thousands of us who follow Jesus Christ, who believe in life, in creating a culture of life, what if each of us looked at those quiet connections as holy moments, as divine appointments, and we stepped into them with eyes wide open, ears ready to hear, and ready to give words of life to whoever we happen to see? That's what I'm thinking about today. And I hope you have a great day. And thanks for listening to Coffee with Kirk. We'll look forward to next month and another episode of Coffee.